Vote Kendra Clark for Georgia House District 165. Kendra has a professional background in social work, is a co-chair of the Savannah DSA, is the founder of the Hostess City Mutual Fund, and is a connoisseur of red lipstick. Join the fight to create a Georgia that works for the many, not the few. Are you in Skidaway, Truman Parkway, Dutch Island, Carver Heights, West Savannah, or Isle of Hope like me? Vote Kendra Clark. Kendra is fighting for lower rent costs, fully funded schools, no cost childcare, raising the minimum wage, expanding access to quality, affordable health care, and ensuring homes are owned by families, not corporations. You can join us at the Collage Night Fundraiser to elect Kendra Clark at the Midtown Arthouse on Monday, April 20th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Links to learn more will be posted in the show notes. Let's talk to Kendra. Hi, Kendra. How are you?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Doing well. I'm so happy to have you. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Kendra Clark. I'm currently running for State House of Representatives, District 165, but I wear a lot of other hats as well. I also run Hostess City Mutual Aid, former co-chair for Savannah DSA, and then, the way I pay my bills is I'm currently a paralegal, but my background's in social work, so I do a lot of different things.
You were just so deeply into our local community. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm happy to be here. I think, getting out and talking to people, that's, one, something I love to do, but obviously also a huge part of doing a campaign.
You've been canvassing today. How'd that go?
It went great. We were over in the 37th Waters area. Live Oak is the neighborhood. And I love canvassing. Canvassing is so fun because you get to talk to people about the things they care about. And they love it when it's the actual candidate on their door. So rather than going off the script, I'm just like, listen, I'm just here talking to voters. What do you care about? Let's talk about it. And so there's a little bit more free form to it. But I love listening to people and their stories. I love being able to see the neighborhood so much more clearly. Like, you see it so different walking, going door to door than you do just driving by every day. You see all the little nuances and decorations that people pick, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. And then when it comes to what people are talking about, the general consensus as I talk to people is people are concerned about affordability. They're afraid they're not going to be able to afford their property taxes to stay in the home they've lived in for 30 years. They're afraid about not being able to get to work because gas is so expensive. And really, that's the core of what people are concerned about, but a core of why I made the decision to run for office to begin with. And a large part of my platform is addressing affordability, because for too long, our politicians have catered to the interest of corporation and donors rather than the people in our communities.
Absolutely. And in Savannah, it's such a small area. We get hit really hard. So every 1% price increase, every time the landlord changes, it shapes our communities. It absolutely does.
Absolutely. And I tell people, I'm a renter myself. I'm very lucky I have a good landlord who is reasonable about rent. But if I had to find a new place tomorrow, I don't know what I would do looking at what's available, because it is so expensive on top of moving cost, and then secret hidden fees they have in there. They're or an application fee. And for a lot of people, that makes moving, it means that finding affordable housing is really inaccessible, which shouldn't happen. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. Everyone should be able to have somewhere safe to live.
Sure, and people visit Savannah because of our restaurants, because of our bars, because of our artists.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't work in a restaurant or a bar or be an artist and live in these neighborhoods, we're going to lose what makes us special.
Yeah. Well, and we have all these restaurants, and if people can't afford to live near where they work, at some point they're not going to be able to work there anymore.
Right, exactly.
We actually have an event coming up on May 4th that's specifically focused on people in the service industry, because they are the people that keep this town running, and yet for too long, they're the people who are often ignored. And so we'll be talking about, increasing the minimum wage. We're going to talk about creating safer work conditions and better worker protections. How many restaurants have we seen where the workers, close everything down at midnight, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're not reopening ever again. Good luck. Peace out. And so that's not a right thing to do. It's not a way to treat people decently, to take away their livelihood with no notice.
Yeah, what's the minimum? I was a server for years and years. So the minimum wage is a couple dollars, and then everything has to be tips. That's.
Yeah, but even for non-tip positions, our state minimum wage is $5.15. And of course we have to go by the federal, which is $7.25, I believe. But you can't afford anything at $7.25 an hour. So we do have places that pay more, but we have a lot of places that don't. And so people are having to work 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet while also having roommates. And no one should have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet, just to cover even the basics. Like we should have an economy where people can work full time and be able to pay for the things they need, and then have time to invest in hobbies, to invest in time with their family and friends and other interests. Like work shouldn't dictate everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the more time you spend working, the less time you spend taking care of yourself. If you're working 3 jobs, I mean, your health is going to suffer and everything around you suffers. That's no quality of life, and that's not what we want for Savannah.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, because I know your podcast is focused on artists, and I know a lot of them have to work a job to pay the bills, but art is the thing they love. And you should have time to do the things you love. And I think that's important. Like my ex-husband actually drew comic books for a living. So I know all about being in a household with an artist.
I didn't know that. That's so fun. Okay.
So, he would go and work to help us pay bills, but then he would come home and work until midnight, 1-2 a.m. drawing, so he could get into that industry, which he has. He's been able to be really successful in it. But, it took a lot of juggling of all of those things to be able to do the thing that he actually loved and make a living out of it.
Well, that makes sense for your crossover with Midtown Arthouse, too. And I did a chat over there earlier, and that'll go out comparable timing with yours. Tell us about Collage Night.
Yeah, so when we were talking about ways to get people engaged in the campaign, and also to hopefully fundraise and make some money, because I'm never going to be the person who's like, give me $100 for a fancy dinner. Like, that's just not me. And I love collage. I started doing junk journaling probably 2 or 3 years ago. And it's just like such a fun thing. So it's not about making a perfect piece of art. It's just kind of like whatever emotions or vibe you're feeling, like you just take whatever speaks to you and put it together and have fun. And we wanted to kind of carry that into something for the campaign. And so we started doing Collage Night. And so once a month we meet at Midtown Arthouse. And the idea is to create an image that aligns with the future you want for Savannah. Because the thing is we can talk all about the things we can do, but if we can't even imagine the possibilities, it'll never happen. So we have to start by being creative and dreaming big. It doesn't mean that's going to happen tomorrow, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Very good. You have a lot of events coming up. I mean, we've got lots of ways to get involved. So what's next on your, what goes on next week for you?
So next week we have a couple of different things. First, every week we're going to be canvassing every Saturday and Sunday. So knocking on doors, which, like I said, so much fun. If you've ever wanted to learn how to do community building, getting to know your neighbors, it's a great place to start. We're doing phone banking every Tuesday. We'll be starting to do some postcard parties coming up soon. We also have a house party on Thursday. So Miss Patty Hewitt, who previously ran for Congress, is throwing a fundraiser for us on Thursday to help bring in some money for the campaign, because unfortunately campaigns do cost money. Yep. But then I'm also going to neighborhood association meetings and just anything happening in the community, trying to be there and talking with people about the things they care about.
Very good. You did a great speech for the march last weekend. It was so nice to see you on the stage. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, I was very grateful to Suzanne and the Indivisible team for allowing me to speak. And I spoke about the need to build community and getting to know your neighbors and mutual aid, because, I always tell people, even if I get elected, I can only do so much. It really takes all of us working together to create change. None of us can do it alone. And so part of that is taking care of your neighbor, especially in a time where we see the federal government just being as chaotic as they are. Whether you like what they're doing or don't like what they're doing, it's still chaotic. And so finding ways to take care of your neighbors in the meantime. So as things are unaffordable, like making sure people have food, making sure who in your neighborhood needs help, because none of us should have to do this alone. Oh. I'm a little bit of an idealist, but I think the other thing is I think all these things are reasonable and possible. We just have to have leaders who want to make it happen.
Yeah, how did you throw your hat in the ring? How did you get here? You just decided that we deserve better?
Pretty much. I mean, I've considered running for office for a long time. I've always been very engaged in politics in some way. Like, I wrote my first letter to my state representative when I was in the 3rd grade because they were talking about cutting our PE program. Though high school Kendra would have begged to get out of PE, so I'm not an athletic person. But yes, I've always been engaged in those type of things. Considered running for office for a long time, and I always tell people I was running away from it. I was like, I don't want to do this. But I first seriously considered it in 2019. I'd previously worked for the state, working with individuals on parole and probation. And in that job, I was able to help some people, but there were so many flaws, or so many things that prevented people from getting help because of the system itself. So, for example, I initially did that job in Savannah, transferred up to Statesboro, to Bullitt County, and as one of the parole board judges, or parole board members once said, they sentence drug offenders in Bullitt County the way Atlanta sentences murderers. So where possession of a drug charge in Savannah might get you 2 years probation, in Bullitt County it might get you a 20-year prison sentence, which is an insane discrepancy.
Yeah, that's not reasonable.
And these are things that can only be addressed at the state level. So getting funding for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment. We're talking about addressing a lot of the things that are making housing unaffordable, such as private equity firms buying up single family homes. Like, these are things that have to be addressed at the state. And so I thought about it in 2019, and then I was like, no, I'm going to hold off. And then, the world just got more and more chaotic, and I was like, okay, someone needs to do something. I guess it should be me. I'll throw my hat in the ring and see how it goes.
I love that. And I think it's great timing because we need the people around us to be reasonable.
Well, it also ended up being good timing because, the current person for my position is Miss Edna Jackson, and she's retiring. So this is the first time the seat has been open in a really long time. And so making sure that we get someone good in there to take her place and really fight for our communities up at Atlanta, because when people think of Georgia, they often only think of Atlanta, but we know Savannah is just as important. And I feel like people are forgetting about us less.
Yes, we're getting bigger and bigger.
We're getting bigger. We're getting a little bit more attention. But making sure that the concerns way over here at the coast make it up there to the Capitol, and that the people in our communities are being advocated for up there. Because we can get deep in policy, but I know sometimes that makes people their eyes just glaze over. They're like, what is this?
What's your favorite challenge right now, policy-wise?
Oh, my favorite challenge is, the challenge at the state is, we have a Republican-led House, Senate, and governor right now. And so they kind of run the show. And so there have been some really good bills that have been put forth. And kind of the way it works at the state legislature is you propose a bill, it gets read, and then it gets assigned to a committee. And I always say committees are where good bills go to die, and they never make it out. And so I think finding ways to get the other side to do reasonable things, which sounds very difficult. But I'm originally from Alabama, so my family is all conservative. But we have really great conversations about politics because my dad, he's always taught me that he doesn't care how I vote as long as I vote. And so he and we will talk about this stuff. And even though we disagree, we can talk about it reasonably. We can talk about it in a way that's respectful of the other person. We had an amazing conversation a couple weeks ago about reparations.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, but it was great. And by the end of it, he's like, oh,
Cool.
I don't know that there's been a few things I've been able to flip him on. I'm usually not, but I can at least make him be more open to things. But, I think having that experience of being able to talk to people who have differing beliefs, I think that's something that can work really well at the state capitol, because we do have to work with the other side. And I know some of the people I've heard up there, they're like, well, the Republicans, they take all of our good ideas and make it their own. And I'm like, listen, that's fine with me. I don't need credit for it. I just need good things to happen for the community. If they want to steal my ideas, please, let's do it. Or finding creative ways to sell an idea, I know, if you don't like this, you cut this out. But I know, after the death of Charlie Kirk, for example, there was talk about how implementing some sort of gun control bill named after him because he was killed by gun violence.
Honestly, if that's what gets us here, the thing we've been fighting for 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, so like, finding creative ways to get people on board that wouldn't otherwise. That's also why I think we need young people in office, because we need some new, fresh ideas.
Well, and we need people that are younger to realize that this is not normal.
Yeah.
So we've been doing these protests. I looked at it. It's been 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
10 years of our lives have been, some form or fashion in the streets saying that, this is chaos. This is supposed to be reasonable and respectful, and we should all be working together.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's a lot of these kids, these college kids, that remember a time when that was the case and it was not just pure chaos.
Oh, yeah.
So we need them engaged in a reasonable way.
Well, and two, I remember having a conversation with a friend who is like, they are like 10 years younger than me. And so the only version of the Republican Party they've ever known is Trump. And so for them, if you're a Republican, like, I don't have any contact with you. And don't get me wrong, I think the Republican Party has done harmful things prior to Trump, but he has taken it and exacerbated it. But there are people who are traditional conservatives who are people you can have reasonable conversations with.
Yeah, I would love to argue over like a 10-cent tax. I would love to argue over a 1-cent tax for which roads are fixed. That's a very reasonable conversation to have. I want that back.
Yeah. But for a lot of younger people, they've never known that there was a difference. And so I think that's a large part of why this divide has become even stronger, is because that's all they've ever known. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh, this makes so much more sense. Because like I grew up in a time where like, it was like Ron Paul, who, whether you agree or disagree with him, he's like a person of principle who like, he's like the Bernie Sanders of the right. Like he's been saying the same thing for 30, 40 years, and he's going to keep saying it until he's dead. Because this is what he believes. He's not being bought out by anyone. He's like, I'm a libertarian. This is what I believe. And so having that version versus Trump is very, very different.
Absolutely.
But I think another thing of why we need young people, and I think this ties into art, is as we're seeing AI become more and more prominent, we need to have young people who know how to regulate it, who understand how the technology works to be able to regulate it. I think AI is not going anywhere, but it doesn't mean that we can't find ways to, one, make sure it's not stealing the property of artists, to protect their work, and it's not replacing their jobs, because like you can't replace like human connection and human heart. A machine can't do that. But also like making sure that videos that are AI generated are marked, so our parents aren't being fed fake news, for lack of better words. Because some of them are they look very realistic. Like I just get to the point sometimes I'm like, is this AI?
Yeah.
Is this not? Or sometimes it's just like an insane video. It's not AI, but like I like doubt it because there's so much.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is happening in the world? So like being able to regulate that in social media in ways to make sure it's healthy, and also with AI, making sure it's not taking jobs away from the people in our communities, because that's where they're trying to go. They want to make all the money without having to pay people. So, well, I think because I know I went to a forum this morning for a school board president. And they didn't talk about AI, but and talking about like education, like if kids are using it, finding creative ways to use it as a tool, not as the only thing. So I know there was one teacher where she like had her students ask ChatGPT or one of the programs a question, and then ask it for sources, and then they actually had to go and check the sources. Are the sources actually aligned with what it says? So like using that to build critical thinking skills versus just blatantly typing in a question and getting an answer. So using it to engage and get people to question things versus just being lazy, for lack of better words.
Yep.
Not that only people only use it because it's lazy, but if I see one more AI generated flyer, like I'm gonna pull my hair out. So
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of AI at all. No. I know it's not going anywhere, but
yeah. I make all my own stuff. Now I use Canva. I'm not, I don't have time to hand draw anything, and it probably wouldn't be very good anyway. But I try to make sure I make everything myself, because I think people are tired of the generic fuzzy brown background AI generated flyers. So yeah.
What do you think the biggest problems in Savannah are?
Ooh. I mean, the biggest issues are like housing, obviously.
Sure.
You know, because I've been here for 15 years. I think when I first moved here, I paid like $800 for a 2-bedroom apartment. That was like a garden city out by Chatham Parkway. It wasn't like downtown, but you could find something within that range that was nice and reasonable. And now they want $2,000 for a closet with the mini fridge. And that's insane to me.
It's just not a good way to have talent here.
No. And so, like I said, housing affordability is a huge part of what I'm fighting for. But the other thing is wages. You know, like I said, we've already talked about how low their minimum wage is, but especially with the rising costs, like you could barely afford an $800 apartment when you could find it at minimum wage. And now it's that $800 apartment's now become a $1,500 apartment. And so we have to raise wages for people to afford to stay here and to make it worth their while. Like I remember when I worked downtown, not only are you paying for your living or your rent, you're paying for groceries, you're also having to pay parking even just to go to work. Or if you live in Savannah and work out in Pooler and don't have transportation, you're having to pay for an Uber because public transit system doesn't go out in Pooler because they don't want the wrong kind of people out there or something. Let's just call it what it is. But, you know, like I drove Uber for full time for a while when I left my job in 2019 when I was trying to figure out what to do. And like, I always felt so bad because I would like pick someone up at like the Walmart out in Pooler and then drive them to Savannah after they got off work. And I'm like, you're spending at least like 2 hours of your wages just to get home. So like, I mean, I have to make money too. So it's like, you know, but like, I felt so bad.
Yeah, 3 of your 8 hours is gone with rides and lunch.
Mm-hmm.
How do you save? How do you contribute to the community? How do you grow? How do you own a small business? How do you make changes to help others with all that gone just immediately? It's impossible.
You don't. You know, poverty is very expensive because there's a tax for everything. And I'm not talking about like property tax or income tax. I'm talking about like the tax you have to pay because you accidentally overdrew your bank account, or the tax you have to pay because you're having to pay double for an Uber because there's not reliable public transportation, or you're having to pay a late fee because your power bill was double what it was last month because it's the middle of the summer and you can't afford to pay it all. So you pay a little bit and pay a little bit the next month. And all those things add up that make it really hard for people to get ahead.
Yeah. You get sucked into the cycle and it's impossible to escape.
But that's where our government should be stepping in to help people. It should make it easier, not harder.
Yeah. We need people like you.
Yes, I think so. I'm a little biased. I did tell that to one person we were canvassing today. She was like, well, who all was running? And I was like, well, it's this person, and me. I was like, I'm a little biased, but I think I'm the best. We'd had a good conversation by that point, so I could make that joke, but you can't make that joke with everyone. But we'd been talking for probably like 20 minutes at this point, so it was good.
Do you have anything to say about the other candidates?
No, I mean, I think, you know, everyone is first-time candidates. We're all young. I do, like I said, I do think I'm the best. But, you know, I think it's great that young people are getting involved and engaged. I think that's what's needed. And so anyone who is willing to do this work of running for office, I applaud them because it's hard work. You know, you have to be everywhere all the time. And it's a lot of fun, but, you know, it's not a very healthy lifestyle. So, you know, it's just you're eating a little bit less healthy, trying to hydrate when you can, and probably not getting as much rest as you want. But it's worth it because we're all of us, whether we agree on everything or disagree on it, we're all working towards a community that's better. You know, I know I've talked to both of my opponents, and I'm like, listen, just because we're running against each other, that doesn't mean we're enemies. We can be each other opponents and not be enemies.
For sure.
So yeah, I think that's important. I was like, I'll tell a funny story. So last weekend we were canvassing. So when you're canvassing, you have like a list, and there's an app that tells you like what houses to go to based on what list you've generated. And you click on the little dot, and then it'll tell you like the names of the people in the house. So we looked at the address, and I was with someone else. I was letting him run the map. And I knock on the door, talk to this lady. She's very nice. And then as we're walking off, he's like, Kendra, I have failed you. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, this is your opponent's house. Apparently, I was talking to his grandmother. No, she didn't tell me. And I don't know if she realized it when I was talking to her or realized it afterwards. Because then, I work with one of his good friends. And apparently, he had called the guy I work with and was like, is she trying to mess with me or like be funny? And he's like, no, he's like, Kendra does not have a bone like that in her body. Like she probably just didn't realize it. I mean, and that's what we were like. I'm like, oh no. I was like, that's embarrassing.
Well, how would you figured out that it was his grandmother?
Well, no, it was his house. His name. So the person who was running the minivan, it had his name there, but he didn't pull it up until after I'd started talking. So he didn't realize it until after we were already in it. He's like, well, at this point we're here. So I was like, no, I don't even know what funny thing I could have done by knocking on my opponent's door. but no, it wasn't anything fishy. It was just, we didn't look at the name before we knocked. So
do you think she'll vote for you?
I doubt it. I'm pretty sure she's going to vote for her grandson because, I feel like that's what grandmas do.
If it weren't her grandson, do you think she'd vote for you?
I mean, you never know.
Very
I think so.
Answer.
I think so. Because when we're out here talking to people, we're having really good conversations, and people are impressed that the actual candidate's showing up at the door. When we were doing phone banking, there was one lady, and when she answered, she's like, I'm on the other line. Can you call me back in like 15 minutes? I'm like, yeah. So I wrote down her name and number because, it pushes you through the list. And I called her back, and she's like, this is the first time I've ever had an actual candidate call me. And so for her, that was a big deal. And I was like, listen, if I'm not willing to show up for you, how can I expect you to show up for me? That's always been the core of our campaign. We're not paying consultants, or we're not paying canvassers to go out and knock doors for me. It's either me or it's people who have volunteered because they believe in what I'm doing. Because if I can't get people to mobilize and try to get me elected, then I probably shouldn't be there to begin with, because you need someone who can mobilize people, who is engaged in the community, to be your elected leader. Or I think so. I think that's what makes good leaders. I don't need someone who could just pay a bunch of people. We've had enough of that in politics. So
to be a villager, you need to have a village. You have to be a good villager. Yeah,
absolutely.
Has anyone, either in phone banking or canvassing in person, had like a really tricky question for you?
Ooh. Yeah, so there was one guy we were canvassing last week, and, he was talking about how Republicans lead both the House and the Senate at the state legislature. He's like, what are the Democrats' plans? I'm like, what, like a county level or the state? He's like, at the state level. Like, what is the Democratic Party of Georgia? What is their plan? What is their platform? I'm like, sir, I genuinely do not know. Maybe they have one, but I don't know that they have a cohesive platform that they're running. I was like, now they are putting a lot of time and money into challenging Republican incumbents, particularly at the Senate. The Senate Democrats I think they have every Senate seat contested. Or almost all of them, if not all of them, to try to flip some of those. But when it comes to messaging and platform, I was like, I genuinely do not know. And thankfully, Chase, who I was canvassing with, he jumped in. He's like, do you mind? He's like, let me just try to answer. He's like, I think their big thing right now is just kind of like harm reduction. So just stopping the worst things from getting passed. Which, don't be wrong, is great. They do try to pass some insane things that would be very harmful to our communities. But I think we need to do more than just prevent harm. We need to be actively working towards things that are good. And like I said, there's the things we know we can get done today, but doesn't mean we shouldn't fight for the harder things to pass for the future. Like, we have to do both.
What's your day one goal?
My day one goal? Oof. That's a good question.
Right? Like, other than throw a party. For, like, everybody that worked so hard on your campaign,
yeah.
Like, knocked on all the doors in the heat. I mean, that's a reasonable answer, too.
So, one thing that's interesting about my race is there's no Republican, so whoever wins the primary is it. So, between the primary and the general, a lot of our work, we won't be campaigning in the same way, but it'll be more like community forums. It'll be more like get out the vote kind of stuff, because we want to make sure people show up even in November, because there's so much important stuff on the ballot, not just me. Maybe be canvassing for other candidates. But, we're talking about like day one at the state legislature. I think there are some bills that need to be put forth. I think one, obviously, raising the minimum wage. But there were 2 bills to raise the minimum wage this past session, but they both died. They both got put in the labor committee, and that Jesse Petrie is on, our local representative out on Tybee and the landings. And of course, it did not make it out of that committee. But also, I think doing a moratorium on data centers. So that way, but at least a year of like, let's figure out what the implications of these things are before we just keep building them, especially if we're paying for the infrastructure to build them, because we just allow Georgia Power to do whatever they want. I think we need to immediately overturn the law. So a few years ago, they passed a law that basically limits local government's ability to not cooperate with ICE. And as we've seen ICE continue to escalate things, I think we need to get rid of that. Return that power back to our local communities to make the decisions that are best for those local communities. Republicans say they're all about small government, but yet they prevent our local governments from doing things all the time. And then also there's, so I did the oral interviews for the Savannah City Council races for the Savannian a couple years ago. And one of the questions people were ask them about rent control. And the thing is the city cannot pass rent control because there's a state law that prevents it. And so I think overturning that law, and once again, putting those decisions back in the hand of our local municipalities, because what works for Savannah might not work for Macon or work for Ludowici or all these other towns, because they have different issues. But in Savannah, because apparently people discovered us during COVID and everyone moved here, that's made housing costs skyrocket.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to rein some of that in so the people who live here and work here can continue to live and work here, and do so without struggling, without having to get 10 roommates or live in a closet. So, yeah.
What's been the biggest challenge so far? Funding.
Yeah, so, money is always a thing, especially because there are so many races, and there's so many candidates in all the races, which there are people who complain about that, and they're like, they need to get together because it's making resources spread too thin. But honestly, I think it's a good thing. I would rather more people run. That way we have different ideas, because whoever ends up being the candidate, at the end of the day, by having other people go against them, it makes their ideas better. It makes them stronger. Because we need a mixture of ideas. We don't have to just keep doing the same thing we've always done, because that's what we've always done. Which I will, that is another, so that reminded me, talking about getting good candidates, we also need ranked choice voting. So when we have 8 people in a primary, we're not having to do an expensive runoff, and we're getting good candidates. But that's a bigger push because the Democrats don't want that either. So, I might be fighting both sides of the house for that one.
So how do we get involved with the Kendra Clark campaign?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about me and my campaign, you can go to votekendraclark.com. I'm also on all social media at Vote Kendra Clark. So that's TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And we have a lot of different ways to get involved. One, the biggest thing is just tell people about me. Word of mouth is one of the biggest endorsements you can do. It's just telling your neighbor, be like, hey, I heard about this chick. She seems really awesome and has some great ideas. Her name's Kendra Clark. You should vote for her. So word of mouth, sharing who I am, sharing my ideas, sharing my posts on social media, all of that is very helpful. If you're interested in getting involved in volunteering, we have plenty of volunteer opportunities. Like I said, we're doing phone banking, we're doing canvassing. For house parties, we're having people, your job is just to make sure we have everyone's information, because when people donate, you have to make sure that there's legally required information. So name, address, their employer, all of that we have to get. And so making sure we get that information up front, so I'm not chasing people down when my financial reports to you. So there's or even helping with social media, or like if you're like, hey, there's an event, it seems cool, and you're going to it, I'll come behind you and take some photos. Like there's plenty of ways to get involved. And then of course, if you're like, I don't have any time, but I got a little money, you can always donate. You can go votekendraclark.com/donate, and that'll take you to my Act Blue page. Even if it's just, $5, $10, every little bit counts. Like I have one guy, he does a reoccurring payment of $1 every month.
Cool.
Because he's a student, he doesn't have a lot, but he's like, I want to help, so that's what he can contribute, and that makes a big difference. And also, it's just nice to know, like they're like, listen, I don't have a lot, but I'm willing to give something, and I think that's important too. And then of course, vote. So that's whether you're in my district or not. If you're in my district, vote for Kendra Clark. But even if you're not in my district, we have the primary on May 19th. Early voting starts April 27th through May 15th. The deadline to register to vote is April 20th. So they did a big voter purge over the last year. So make sure you check your voter registration to make sure you're still registered. Make sure you're at your current address. But it's a big election. We have a lot on the ballot. Besides me, we have Board of Education, we have governor, we have at both the federal and state level, we have House and Senate. We have insurance commissioner, which is the person who regulates your health insurance cost and your car insurance and your property insurance to make sure they're actually covering the things they're supposed to and not charging you insane amounts. We have Public Service Commission, which oversees Georgia Power. Like there's so much important stuff on the ballot. So make sure you vote. And primaries are important because that's how you get a good candidate to come when it gets to the general. Like now is the time where you can nitpick and be like, why do you believe this? Like you should hold your people running for office and your people in office to a standard. You should be asking them questions about why they think a certain way, or if they haven't given a stance, you should be asking them. Like that is your job as a voter, is to hold us accountable. And then if people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, you vote them out. And because that's what a democracy does. And that's how we're going to get strong candidates, is by holding people accountable. So make sure you're, interrogating people, myself included. So I got to bring it on. So.
Well, Kendra, I've enjoyed this interrogation. Do you have any final thoughts aside from vote for me and get your butts in the polls?
Outside of that, just thank you for having me. I think it's great when we can work with different groups, even if I know your stuff's mostly about art, but everything is political. There's nothing that isn't. And so I think politics gets weaved into everything. But yeah, go vote. And also, I will reiterate this once again. Even if I'm elected, I can't do this alone. So get involved in your communities, get involved in your local nonprofits. They need your support more than ever as federal funds have been cut. Get involved in local mutual aid efforts. If you don't know what that is, like I said, you can go to Hostess City Mutual Aid, which is a page I run. It's gotten a little less love lately because I've had to do so much with the campaign. But there's so many great things going on in our city. And if you want to see change, vote, but also get involved in other ways, because there's a multitude of ways to create change and to do things in our community, and it takes all of us working together.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. Kendra Clark will make it even better.
Yes, vote Kendra Clark.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks so much to Kendra Clark for coming on. I really love her as a person and have known her for a while, and look forward to helping what little I can on the campaign as she rushes towards the midterms.